First, I want to thank everyone joining today, and I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce what we are going to be doing for our next hour. The motivation for creating this webinar came from participants of the Fire Adapted Colorado Network. Fire Adapted Colorado, also known as FACO, is an independent nonprofit organization designed by mitigation specialists to connect, power, and support the wildfire resilience community. My name is Laura Thomas, and I'm the Training and Network Specialist. Our goal today is to provide some grounding and some guidance on an issue that is currently volatile and murky. The three focus topics for today are guidance for homeowners for the current insurance climate, guidance for organizations writing letters to insurance companies, and then taking a pulse on the future of insurance in Colorado. It's important that we acknowledge that this webinar is 1 hour in length and that the intended audience is those that communicate with homeowners. We respect that there's no quick solution for this topic and that this topic is more complex than what can be discussed in an hour. Rather, the goal is to take a bite out of the elephant with some focused conversation and also connect you to resources, partners that exist in our fire adapted community. We intend to provide some threads of navigation. We try to cut through the confusion that we are all feeling in this space. There was a very high demand for this webinar topic, so FACO answered the call to engage. I want to strongly advocate that more ground level guidance is needed. If your organization wants to continue this conversation, FACO is happy to support and promote that planning. Before we get started, there's a few things to know about our webinar environment today. One is that you can message the host of this meeting, but there's no collective group chat space to talk to other participants. The enrollment's just a little bit too high. We are also not incorporating a question and answer session. This allows us to keep our topics focused, and through the webinar, you'll be introduced to some additional resources for continued thinking and collaboration. I want to thank anyone who submitted questions and additional topics that they would like guidance on as part of our registration form. We use these in our planning and obviously cannot incorporate every topic today, but we are happy to share that information with any other groups looking to continue this conversation. This webinar will be recorded and that recording is shareable. We recognize that insurance topics can feel frustrating and can be a source of strong emotion. Feel welcome to leave the webinar or take a break. And if you want to return to this topic later, that link will be available to everyone that registered for this webinar. Acknowledging that we only have an hour together, I've taken the time to create a resource one-pager to compile relevant resources that exist in our wildfire resilience community. I will drop this in our chat shortly, and I will refer to this again at the end of today's webinar, but want to encourage everyone in today's audience to view a recent webinar created by the Colorado Division of Insurance. It is called Homeowners Insurance, Affordability and Accessibility, and that should be viewed in conjunction with our webinar. In this recording, United Policyholders and professional independent insurance agents of Colorado introduce their role as advocates for these insurance issues and expand on topics including guidance for HOAs and in-depth tips for homeowners shopping for insurance in today's market. The Division of Insurance and United Policyholders also have a robust toolkit for homeowners and HOAs that are linked in this resource one-pager. Finally, the speakers on today's call are trying to avoid use of acronyms, and we'll try to introduce acronyms as they plan to use them. If you're getting bogged down by an acronym, you can use the chat to bring that to our attention. With that, I would like to invite Bill to kick off our discussion.
Great. Thanks, Laura, and thanks to FACO for putting this on, and thank all of you who are on. This is an important topic. My name is Bill Tremarco. I work for the Wildfire Adapted Partnership. We're a 501c3 in Southwest Colorado. We have been in existence since 2003. I've been with them since 2012. Our basic goal is to protect lives and property from wildfire. The tools we use for that are education and outreach, planning, and helping people to implement plans. We are members of numerous groundbreaking collaboratives in the area, and we use various programs to help people out this way. I'm also a NFPA certified wildfire mitigation specialist. So what I wanted to talk about today was the role of insurance. I think it's important that people realize insurance companies are for-profit entities. They basically exist to insure people against various risks. So, you know, in our field, we usually are dealing with homeowners insurance. So it's good to keep in mind that insurance companies charge premiums so that they can generate profit. When they have to pay claims, it comes out of those profits. That's, you know, a lot of people think they're just out to rip everybody off, and, you know, they are a business, and that's part of it. They need to make money to be able to pay money out. Part of how that they guarantee they can do that is by getting reinsured. And they need insurance for when their payout costs go over the premiums. That did happen for sure in 2022 out west here. The numbers I heard was basically insurance companies lost 7%. They took in 7% less money than what they paid out. So when these insurance companies go to get reinsured, they usually don't go, there isn't really a company they can go to get their insurance to protect them. It's usually with large investment firms. And basically, it is pretty hard to get people to invest in something that has a track record of losing money the previous year. So that's kind of what set things up for why the insurance companies are doing what they're doing with dropping coverages and things like that and raising rates and all the stuff that people deal with. I think the other thing we really need to look at is what are the roles of the practitioners in this field, the ones who are like neighborhood ambassadors, wildfire mitigation specialists, fire marshals, things like that. And I think it's good for us to remember what it is, what's our wheelhouse. And the main thing there is we're risk managers. We're trying to lower the risks for people who own homes, property, land. And we try and do that we have the best available science of what works and what doesn't work. We do know how to protect homes. We know how to harden homes. We know how to create defensible space around them. A lot of what we do is using those and other tools to help protect individual properties and individual people and to help build fire adapted communities. I see that as being our role. That's our wheelhouse. So how do we interact with the insurance companies? And this is an important thing, I think, for us to realize where we're coming from, what we can and can't do. We're not insurance brokers or facilitators. I think for most of us on this call, it is not our job to help people get homeowners insurance. We can give them some guidance, but we're really out to try and help protect them, not to help them get insurance. And we can make a lot of recommendations that are based on this best available science that we have to us to deal with these things. So I think it's important to realize that what we say and do may or may not influence people's abilities to get coverage. We really don't control that. And I think it's good to know too that in most cases, the individual insurance agents also have very little control over who gets policies and who doesn't. The final arbiter on that is the insurance underwriters, the ones who are taking on the risk of insuring you. And I think it's good to remember that agents want to help you. They make money if you get a policy with their company. Insurance underwriters are not looking at you as their first interest. Their main interest is to make sure that the company makes enough money to be able to pay claims and hopefully to also turn a profit for the investors who are putting up the money to support these things. So I think it's good to just kind of remember that when you're dealing with these kind of things. The other thing that a lot of us are wondering is, where is this insurance industry headed? What's going to happen here? And I think in a lot of ways, if we look to California, we can see what's happening in Colorado down the line. And Allstate and State Farm both pulled out of California. They're not issuing any new policies. Agents that I've talked to that deal with California have said a lot of people are not being offered the option to renew with those two companies. We'll see what happens here in Colorado. Quite often where California goes, Colorado follows. So there are insurance companies who've determined the risk is not worth the rewards in wildfire prone areas. In California, to deal with people like that who can't get insurance, they have established a statewide pool. Colorado has the FAIR plan, which is in process. It will be a statewide pool for people who can't get insurance. We're expected to see a rollout of that sometime in 2025. I don't know where that committee is at with that, but there may be someone else later in this that knows something there, but something is happening there. The other thing that I think we are going to be seeing in Colorado is statewide building codes, meaning wildland interface building codes, wildland urban interface building codes, WUI building codes, probably for new developments. And I think because of the insurance problems and the threat to homes here, a lot of our legislators are realizing that, well, quite honestly, we as people are not smart enough to follow our own best advice, and it may be legislated for us of what type of communities can be built in the WUI. So, we'll see what happens with that. And the main thing that I look at this is, dealing with, I do hundreds of assessments, some very in-depth, at least 100 very in-depth with work plans every year, and deal with a lot of people. And when I'm trying to deal with all this insurance stuff, I kind of go back to what I can do best. And what I can do best is help those people harden their homes and create defensible space around them. I hope that will help them get insurance or keep insurance, but I can't control what standards the insurance companies are using. I can go by best science that I've learned through all of our resources that are available to us through the NFPA, the U.S. Forest Service. There's Insurance Health and Business Safety Institute, whose acronym I won't use because I always goof up the letters, but there are a lot of people who've done a lot of research on this and know what stands the best chance of protecting homes. And I feel that that's my job. That's my main job, is to get that through to the private homeowners. So that's all I have at this time. I believe, Jessica, you are up next.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So today I am here to talk to you about my experience losing my home in the East Troublesome Fire. My name is Jessica Ron. I am the president and executive director of the Grand County Wildfire Council, and I got involved after losing my home. So I'd like to talk to you all about what I wish I knew beforehand about my home insurance. I wish I knew the true cost as much as possible of rebuilding. I wish I knew what actual cost versus replacement cost value meant. I wish I knew how much time it was going to take to rebuild. So let's go into each of these a little bit more. So the first recommendation I would have is to understand your policy and get to know your agent. Make them explain your policy to you. Knowing your agent can assist with navigating the post-fire landscape after you lose your home. We had a personal relationship with ours, and it made a big difference, especially at the beginning. Our agent was actually not the person that handled distributing our insurance money. That was a different, more corporate side of the company, but he did help us navigate a lot of different areas. Next, I would recommend that you understand your estimated cost to rebuild and then add at least 10%. Places that you could get that information include local builders associations, general contractors in your area, There are even online estimates for your zip code for cost per square foot with low, mid, and high grade materials that can help you determine how much it would take to rebuild your home. The cost of that policy is going to be based on what your insurance agent believes it's going to take to rebuild your home, but it definitely would be a benefit to look into it yourself and make sure that you have the coverage that you need. So for us, we were over $200,000 underinsured, even though we had increased our insurance about 18 months earlier for an addition that we built. If you think back to that time, this was October 2020, East Troublesome Fire. We were all in the midst of the pandemic, and the labor and material supplies were even further exacerbated in our local community. But still something to think about in any environment. So I recommend that you look at your policy every year and at least look at adjusting it for inflation. Next, your personal property policy. So 3.5 years later, we are still dealing with our personal property claim. On this issue alone, I have probably spent over 500 hours of my time. It has truly been a nightmare. Part of the problem that we have is that our policy requires us to submit receipts to obtain the full replacement cost value of almost all of our items. Up front, once we listed out all of our thousands of items and submitted them to the insurance company, we received the depreciated value up front. Then once and if we individually replace that item, then we submit that receipt and receive the remaining value of that particular item. As you can imagine, that takes a lot of time. So if you can afford it, I highly recommend getting a full replacement cost policy so that you receive the full value of your personal property up front and don't have to submit receipts for the difference.
Jessica, this is
One thing
Bill.
that we, Mhm.
I'm just wondering, do you recommend that people maybe take videos or something of personal property to help? Like, did you have trouble remembering everything after all this grief?
Yes, great point, Bill. That is something that I would highly suggest. So we had taken pictures on our way out of the house of each of the rooms. A video is probably easier, but pictures or video will definitely help you remember things. Even with that, it's not really, you may not get everything. And so I think to just understand that there are some things that you're probably never going to remember to replace. That would have been helpful to kind of realize. On our rental assistance policy, we were grateful that we had a rental assistance policy that allowed us to rent a similar home whose rent was almost fully covered by insurance. So again, pandemic, Grand County has a lot of housing issues anyway. The fire hit. Our insurance company was paying $8,000 a month for us to have a similar home. So a 3-bed, 3-bath home in our area. If we had had a different type of policy, we would not have been able to have a similar home, regardless of the cost. And obviously $8,000 a month is a ridiculously high cost. The other thing that we learned about this with rental assistance policies is we had a 24-month policy. And it seemed like enough time, right, when the fire hit. But with the labor and material shortages, typical building issues, right, you're always going to run into that. It was not enough time for us. So check your policy. I would recommend having 36 months of coverage for that. We had to move in with 1 toilet and no shower after moving 3 times in the last month, staying with different friends after insurance had run out. So obviously 24 months just wasn't enough time for us to rebuild. So I know the baseline of having insurance is more important than the issues I'm talking about today. But for those of you that have insurance now, please check your policy. Should the worst happen, you can avoid some of the pain that we suffered on top of losing our home and our place in the world. Additionally, learn how to protect your home by doing the wildfire risk reduction work, and that will reduce your risk of losing it in a wildfire. May or may not help with insurance. Obviously, we all hope that it will start to matter more, but it will absolutely increase your home's chance of surviving a wildfire, which is another way that you can avoid the experience that I had. So don't wait, start mitigating today. Thank you all for listening to me today, and I hope you are able to take something valuable out of my experience. And next we have Doug Berg.
Okay, hello. Well, thanks, Jessica. That was a good topic. And Bill, I really liked what you had to say about that, and I'm going to touch a little bit more on that. Let's start off with the introduction. My name is Doug Berg. I was a career firefighter for 25 years. Been doing wildland fire for 33 years, with about 22,000 recorded hours out in the field. I'm currently a complex operations chief on incident management teams where we pretty much manage all large wildland fires across the US and Canada, and also do other disasters like 9/11 and any other man-made disasters. Also, I'm a wildland division chief for a fire department, so I deal with the wildland portion of that deployments for most of the firefighters. And also an owner of a company, High Country Wildland Fire Consulting, where I do give some advice to the insurance industry. That advice is usually secondary to some information that they already have, and I'll kind of expand on that here in a second. So let's talk about mitigation real quick. I'm going to mention again towards the latter part of this talk, but as a fire community in the US, we have suppressed wildland fires for over 100 years. If you go back, if you're able to look at old photos of areas of Colorado, Oregon, even northern part of Arizona, upper California, look at the vegetation. Look what it looked like in the 1910s, 1920s, and even in the 30s. There was a lot more logging. There was a lot less complicated NEPA, which is the federal standards to go through on trying to do anything on federal lands. So there was a lot of logging. There was also a lot of wildland fires. You look at Native Americans, and every year they would burn their land to try to get good crops and get good yield of the soil. Well, we came along and we started suppressing fires because of the threat of them moving into towns. So keep that in mind when we're moving forward. We have hundreds of years of suppressing wildland fires, and now all of a sudden we have a obligation to try to stop these fires before they move into communities, to try to keep people's personal property protected. Now, when you think about that, you got to think of your house as fuel. And I'm going to touch on that in a second here at the end under nuggets. But realistically, your house is just a type of fuel. The fire has no idea what type of fuel it's going to burn through and what type of fuel your house is. But you have to look at your house as a type of fuel. So last year in 2023 was the lowest acres burned in the United States since they've been keeping record. So hands off, it was the slowest wildland fire season we've ever had. With that said, you talked, Bill mentioned State Farm and Allstate, and I do work for all the carriers, and I get requests from almost all the carriers to go look at large and small properties all the way from Wyoming down to Telluride, and I also cover the mountainous area of Arizona. So I cover about 13 counties with quite a few other employees that work for me, and we can go out and take some pictures for properties and get those back to the underwriters. Now, with that said, is last year with the slowest wildland fire season in history that we've been keeping. This year is lined up to not be that way. It's not looking real good on our forecast for monsoons, and they might come in a little late because we are transitioning from an El Nino to a La Nina. And Yes, we've had some winter moisture and our snowpack's pretty good up in the mountains, but that's only winter moisture. Winter moisture only affects about 30 to 40% of the overall wildland risk. And it's usually in the timber. It's not in elevations below 6,000, 7,000 feet. That's mostly where it's grass and brush. Now, spring rains is what kind of curtails wildland fire season, is spring rains and the monsoons. If those do manifest themselves like they did last year across almost the whole western US, then usually we have a very slow wildland fire season. Now, State Farm and Allstate decided to pull out of some zip codes in Colorado, even after the slowest wildland season we have on record. So that does tell you something. I do have to mirror what Bill said. We do follow a lot what California does. And the insurance industry is very knee-jerk reaction. They're not very proactive when it comes to that. So it usually is after a large incident that things happen. So the Camp Fire in California, we had the Marshall Fire here in Colorado. Anytime after that, you'll usually see some type of pullback just because of those loss of profits. So they'll definitely take a look at that. Moving forward, do's and don'ts. So do make your property look the best before you apply for a policy. It's just like any other inspection. If you're doing a construction project, with the county, you have to have all the nails and everything in the walls and the ceiling and the roof before you call for an inspection. Same thing when you're going for insurance policies. Make your property look the best. Rake up all the pine litter. Move your firewood more than 30 foot away from the building if you can. Don't leave them on the deck. Those pictures do get to underwriting. They do look at them. Don't restrict access to your property for your carrier. That it really kind of upsets them a little bit when you apply for a policy, but don't grant them access to see what they are supposed to insure. Don't assume another carrier will pick you up, will cover you. Those days are gone. So 20 years ago, when somebody wouldn't insure you, you'd say, well, we'll just move on. We'll go shopping for another insurance carrier. You have to assume that another carrier is not going to write that policy. So don't go into that approach with that mindfulness, is that do what you can for them. If it's reasonable, then please, try to accommodate them on what they're asking. Bill mentioned it. They are a private company. They are for profit. So they don't have to insure you. And that's where we're at right now. And there's a lot of people trying to get legislatures to strong arm them into insuring. Ask them how that went in California. So that's the whole reason State Farm pulled out on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, said we are no longer writing new policies. And that was because the state tried to force them into insuring certain areas, saying they could not pick and choose. So those are some do's and don'ts. Moving forward here, trends with companies bailing out of certain areas in Colorado. I did mention that there are some zip codes that State Farm and Allstate have pulled back on. Some of those are 80439 Evergreen, some's up by Netherland, up in western Boulder County. And I do see it in the Bailey Conifer area. Most of it's on the Front Range, those WUI areas. Now, like I said, is most of the insurance carriers are very knee-jerk reaction. They're very cyclic. So even though they're maybe not writing policies right now, it doesn't mean in 6 months or a year that they're not going to be back to writing policies in those areas, because that does cut into their profit margins when they're not writing new policies. So it is not forever with all those carriers. So if you're having problems with carriers, try to get through, try to do what you can for mitigation to appease them. and then look back in maybe 6 months. Try an agent. If you have an agent that you have a good rapport with, call them back here every couple months. So, and see if they're starting to write policies in that area. Let's talk about navigating dropped coverage. So there's a lot. I live up here too. I live in the mountains, and there is a lot of people being dropped, and some of it you can navigate, some you can't. There are some carriers, AIG and a few others, that just stopped writing policies. So you can't really navigate with them anymore or ask them to take a second look or really look at it. If you do get dropped, don't give up. Don't give up with that carrier just yet. Don't just say, well, okay, we're done with them and we're going to move on. And I know it becomes very personal if you get dropped. But what you have to understand is it's a business aspect for them. So what you can do is ask your agent to have an inspector come out. If you feel that your property is mitigated, that they are dropping you based off of a risk that's not there, then ask for an inspector to come out or somebody to take a look at the property. And more than likely, they'd be willing to do that, especially if you are a renewal insured and you've been with that company for 10, 15, 20 years. More than likely, they would be willing to say, hey, all the information we have, we'll send an inspector out, take a look, get those pictures back to underwriting, and we can make a better decision. And really, that's the best way to navigate that. If you do get dropped, if you get a letter to get dropped, talk to your agent right away about it and ask if there's anything that can be done to try to avoid that permanently being dropped. And many a times it's give some mitigation, or maybe it was something specific. Now, when you're doing that, I want you to look at your property and your house as a risk. So what I'm going to ask everybody here listening is, next time you drive up your driveway, look at your house as a risk. So if you're a third-party company or an outside, look at it as not your home, to where all your valuables are and all your kids' stuff, your parents' heirlooms are all housed. Look at it as a risk. So if you're driving up your driveway, look at your house as a risk. That's going to be the best thing for you to get a realistic look at what other people are looking at. So, talking about risk, part of insurance, the problem we're having with insurance right now is, yes, the wildfire risk. That is part of it. That only makes up a small portion of it, though. You'd think that would be the largest portion. One of the larger portions of it is the cost of the houses. So we all know that how much our homes have gone up in the past 10 to 15 years. And has your insurance kept up with that? Has your premiums kept up with that? And how much does it cost to even get a plumber to your house? You have to understand. Jessica talked about how much it costs for her to rebuild. I mean, plumbers are making what attorneys and doctors used to make 5-10 years ago. So you have to factor that into the cost of the house. One other thing is claims. If you've had claims on your property and you live in a WUI area and your house 5 years ago was $600,000, now it's 1.4 million. You have to understand that from an insurance standpoint, that is, those are some high risks that they're really going to look at. So the price of the home, price of the policy, replacement costs, and then also, whether they're doing a full replacement. Moving on real quick, because we're limited on time here. One thing that we need to look at is being able to bring everybody together to sit at a table and talk about this. All the insurance carriers, not just agents, but we need corporate to sit down at a table. We need the USDA, the Department of Interior, and we need the local legislators and also the local county and your fire departments to sit down and talk about this across the table. So that's an overall thing that we need to try to push to do, is all sit down and talk about this. The final thing is, like I talked about in the beginning, 110, 120 years of suppressing wildland fires. We all need to learn to live with fire. We're not going to get rid of fire anymore. There's not enough money out there to mitigate, to manually do any type of timber cutting and slash removal and everything like that without some type of fire adapted. So we all need to learn to live with fires. And it's just a way we have no choice. So with that said, I think my time's up, and I think we can move on to some letters and insurance companies from Jess, right?
Hi, my name is Jess Moore. I am the Evergreen Fire and Rescue's Wildland Project Coordinator. My fire career began in 2005 in Lake Tahoe, and I will say that it was following Hurricane Katrina that I actually started dealing with insurance companies threatening to drop homeowners back, even, like I said, as far back as 2005. To kind of build on what Doug mentioned, is the reality is it's not just fire. We know that in Colorado, hail is another big claim that insurance companies hate to see and are using as an excuse to drop folks. We here at Evergreen Fire and Rescue, what we have been implementing, I've been here over 2.5 years now, and the mitigation program that we are implementing allows for free home assessments where my mitigation specialists will go out and do full defensible space and home hardening inspections and provide a report for the homeowners. And in addition to that, for a small fee, if a homeowner completes their full defensible space zone according to the Colorado State Forest Service guidelines, their home ignition zone guidelines standards, then I can provide a letter that I sign from EFR that it's very strict and very specific in the language due to the litigious nature of everything, but specifying that at the moment, on the day that I came out and observed their defensible space, they in fact met the Colorado State Forest Service guidelines for home ignition zone for defensible space, not necessarily the home hardening. At the end of the day, again, to build off what Bill said at the beginning, is ultimately from a fire perspective, we are in it to save lives and properties. We want folks to do their defensible space and home hardening because the science shows us and has proven to us time and again that the more mitigation work you do on your property, the more diligent you are in being responsible for what your property looks like, the more it helps us when we come out, on the end of a fire. The creating that mitigation work, it's kind of, even though we're all in this for the insurance elephant in the room, the insurance and hoping to keep your insurance and trying to get insurance, that's really the cherry on the cupcake. Like at the end of the day, we are in this to save lives. And as a community, within the Evergreen community, within the greater Colorado foothills, within all of Colorado, California, wherever in the West you are, if you're not doing this across the board as a community, the one-offs, it's going to help a little bit, but those conflagration fires where all of the homes rip through, it's going to keep happening. We absolutely know that we are dealing with climate chaos. These major fires are going to continue to happen. And the best thing we can do is arm ourselves by creating that mitigation work around our properties, including the structure itself, and arming our communities with mitigated homes and even businesses in some areas. So from our perspective, again, we have the opportunity within Evergreen to be able to at least provide a letter for homeowners if they've done their due diligence and created that work to the state standards. Truthfully, I've had, about a 60-40 success rate. Oftentimes that success rate, they might be allowed to keep their insurance for one more year, and then they are still going to they're still getting flagged. I can tell just by the phone calls I get which insurance companies are coming out and coming after folks. Allstate has been the one this year that, most of those phone calls I get are Allstate insured. And so it's, we don't make any promises with our letter and our support. Again, it really is ultimately about just encouraging folks to do their due diligence and do the work that's asked of them. It's a cherry on a cupcake, like I said, if they're able to actually hold on to their insurance or, in some cases, get other insurance. So that, with that said, I'm going to keep my info here short and sweet, and I'm going to pass it back to Bill.
Thanks, Jess. That's some good advice there. I'm getting notes that I didn't unmute, but I did. Can you hear me? Okay, good.
Good, Bill.
Hey, I'm just going to throw something else in here that's a little off of what we've been talking about, because I think it's really important and nobody's mentioned it. If you have insurance and you don't like your new rates or something that's going on, don't get mad and just cancel. Don't get rid of a policy that you have until you know you have something else. There's been one insurance company in particular I'm thinking of that is taken on some new policies, and 2 months down the road, they send out their inspector and tell you they won't cover you. So like everybody's been telling you, make sure you've done the D-space work around your house and the home hardening. So you don't want to lose insurance. If you are looking for insurance, it's good to keep in mind that there's what's called captive agents and independent agents. The captive agents only have one or two product lines that they can offer you. Independent agents can look at a lot of different ones. I'm not going to say one's better than the other, because the insurance industry changes a lot as to who's going to cover you. If you're shopping, it doesn't hurt to check both. I will mention that if you go to an independent agent, most of them all can cover the same lines. If you go to multiple independent agents and they're all putting in for quotes for you with underwriters, I've heard of underwriters lately that when they get 3 or 4 requests for the same address from different places, they red flag you as a problem property and they might just automatically drop you without even looking at it. So basically, go to a couple captive agents, go to 1 or 2 independent agents, get your quotes, don't drop anything until you know you have something else. That is, for individual homeowners, that's the advice I've been passing on to them. And then as far as like the letter writing and stuff and how effective it is, I will say that in the 10 counties in Southwest Colorado that I'm familiar with, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had some success with that. Since the Marshall fire, when I mention it to a lot of the agents, I've gotten laughs out of them. We are not having any luck with that. So we've been stressing protect your home. And yes, we give them papers that show where they stand based on Colorado State Forest Service guidelines. But we've stopped writing individual letters to any insurance companies because we weren't having success with it. And also our sister organization, the West Region Wildfire Council, which handles a lot of places. They handle a 5-county area just to the north of us, basically Montrose, Gunnison, that area there. They are trying to get a certification program going. I don't think they've gotten much buy-in from the insurance companies to just accept their certificate as being a way to get insurance. That's in process right now. I will say that at Wildfire Adapted, we thought a lot about certification and we chose not to take that risk. To tell people that according to our standards, which is Colorado State Forest Service and or NFPA, we use both of them. we were not comfortable coming up with any kind of language that felt would protect us as to what exactly are we certifying that these homes are good for. So we'll give assessment sheets that they may all be checked in the green boxes and show the home is good, but nowhere on there does it say this is wildfire adapted partnership certified, because we were scared of the legal ramifications of putting something like that in writing. So with that, I'll hand it over to Doug here. Let's hear what you have to say, Doug.
Yeah, so the letters, really hot topic. One thing I'll add to the letters is, other than the usefulness of them anymore, let's talk about liabilities. So really, with the letters, you can't transfer the risk of that property, the wildfire risk, whatever the risk is, the hail damage, you can't transfer that risk. So when your fire department or your county comes out to give you a letter, really what that is you're transferring the liability, a little bit of liability. And I'm going to expand on that real quick. So, insurance carrier A is who you have, and they've given you a threatening letter that they're going to drop you in 3 months if you don't do these 14 items that they want done. And as Bill said, don't just drop them. Don't get upset and just say, you know what, we'll go find somebody else. Really look at those 14 items, see if it's something that you can accomplish. If you think that getting your fire department to show up or something to write a letter for you, that it follows NFPA standards, really what happens is that letter goes to the underwriters, they scan it, goes into your electronic file. So your electronic file for your property address, and maybe it's a home you've only had for a year, maybe it's a home you've had for 30 or 40 years. There are pictures and there are things in that file, your claim history, pictures of the front and the sides of the houses, and even the roof. So most people don't understand or realize that I run into that almost every house in this country has pictures sitting on in a file with their carrier. So when that letter shows up to the underwriters and they look at it, and as Jess said, it might buy you another year. They look at it and they say, well, okay, according to Evergreen Fire, they're up to mitigation. It might buy you another year, but you're still on their radar as a high risk. So what that does is that triggers an inspection almost every year. So every time you go to renew, they're going to send somebody out, take new pictures. So there's going to be hundreds of pictures sitting on file with that letter. Now, when the Marshall fire hit, some of those letters got pulled out. Some of those properties had letters on file, and they got pulled out when that fire burned through there, and they lost all those homes. Now, none of us, especially me being a wildland division chief, want to get a call from State Farm's attorneys and saying, hey, we need to meet with you guys and the fire chief and everybody to go over this letter. Because that letter is a time date stamp. Well, as of that date and that time, your property might have been mitigated to those standards. What that also does is that triggers photos. So they're going to want current photos of that property if they don't already have current photos. So everybody needs to understand that, that's more of a transfer of liability, not a transfer of risk. One last thing is your fire department. I do hear a lot about, hey, we have the greatest fire department in the world. You know what I mean? I got a hydrant 400 feet down the road and we have the greatest fire department in the world. And that's great. You should have a good fire department and be active in your fire department. But what people have to understand is that when a large wildland fire starts to burn through Evergreen or any other place in the US, those fire departments get overwhelmed immediately. So there's definitely not enough fire engines, enough firefighters to take care of everybody's homes. So with that, let's pass it back. I'm going to pass it. Who is next is Mike, right?
Great. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. My name is Mike Thayer. I work for Green Shield Risk. We're a managing general agency in the insurance space, trying to make the world more insurable. We look at look at risk through the wildfire lens and try to provide mitigation solutions. Previous to that, I kicked off my fire career in Jefferson County, Colorado for the Sheriff's Office. And I also worked for AIG Insurance for 8 years as a wildfire mitigation specialist, providing inspections and wildfire response as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety. It was touched on a little bit earlier by Bill, the IBHS. This is a company that is funded by insurance carriers to help make homes more resilient for wildfire, hail, hurricane, flood, all those different natural disasters. They try to understand how to better prepare homes for those risks. So in California, they've focused a lot on what's called the California Wildfire Prepared Home. IBHS put together all their knowledge as far as what burns homes down, all their studies they've done, their in-house projects that they do. They actually build a structure within a wind tunnel and shoot embers at it and see what catches the home on fire. So they've built this standard called the California Wildfire Prepared Home. And why this is a big deal is because it may be coming also to Colorado. It is the strictest standards as far as wildfire mitigation, critically in the 0 to 5 foot zone next to the home. They're looking at a completely non-combustible space. No vegetation, no combustible doormats, no trash cans, no firewood, nothing in that area. And, for many folks, it's a generational change that insurance companies are mandating kind of overnight. So it's a little bit different lens to look through, but they do it with understanding that this is the most critical area for your home. This is where the battle for the home is won or lost, is this 0 to 5 foot zone around the home and making that as resilient as possible. Because as Doug just talked about, there's no guarantee a fire agency is going to show up. There's no guarantee that any other insurance carrier's private resource is going to show up. Your best bet is to protect your home as if nobody's going to show up. And that's kind of how they built the standard to make the homes more resilient. And they've expanded this program in California. Some of the insurance carriers in California picked them up as far as using this to better protect the homes, but also a way to say, hey, if you're not meeting the standard, we're not going to keep renewing you. So that's something I want to talk about because they're planning to expand IBHS out to Colorado and Oregon as well. So it's something that should be on people's radar as far as, what Doug and Bill talked about. The days of doing nothing to your property, those days are gone. We see it out here in California. It's very critical that you take the steps to best protect your property because increasingly we're seeing insurance carriers leave the state in California, and we really don't want to see that happen in Colorado as well. So to better protect your home, make it as resilient as possible, like Jess talked about, you have to take those steps to make it better survive the wildfires. And that kind of takes us into building codes. Colorado is looking at statewide building codes. California has had a WUI building code in place since 2008, and it's been shown to actually save structures. There's a study that have been done. Homes that built after 2008 have a 40% better chance of surviving a wildfire than the same home built to 1990 standards in California. Because you're building with non-combustible siding, you have 1/8 mesh on your vents instead of 1/4 mesh, eliminating embers getting in the structure. So those standards do help save homes. And the sooner this can be done at the statewide level, the better off future homeowners are going to be. There's always cost considerations with it, and that's where the developers always do the pushback. But it's good to see that statewide level push is being put on. Another thing that I just found out as well is that Colorado lost money in federal grants because they have no statewide building codes. So from between 2020 to 2022, they lost over $100 million of available grants from the federal agencies to be able to better protect these homes. So as soon as the codes come into place, it's going to help protect homes down the line in the future because it's a matter not if, but when the fire strikes, and you want to be best prepared to help those homes. And that's kind of what we're looking at out here in California, when we don't want to see it in Colorado. Something that was touched on before by Bill is talk about a FAIR plan. Out here in California, there's been many people pushed the California FAIR plan. In 2018, there was $30 billion of exposure. Now it's over $330 billion in exposure. And those policies are funded by actual admitted insurance carriers. So should something happen in one of those areas that are heavily FAIR plan homes, there could be serious issues coming. So you want to, I think they talked about here a lot, is do what you can for your home to not be put on that FAIR plan. You want to stay with your carrier, whatever it takes. Out here in California, we see a lot of pushback on the California Welfare Prepared Home. People say, hey, I don't want to do that. Well, okay, now you're going to go to the FAIR plan where you're going to pay more money for insurance. And then also you don't get covered all the way. So within a FAIR plan, you are only covered for fire, smoke, and explosion. Your water losses, any kind of hail damage, that's not covered. You have to buy a separate policy for those type of perils. It's fire only that you're getting. So you're going to pay more and get a lot less in return. Another thing to note too, we talked about the cost of homes right now, and the cap on that proposed FAIR plan for Colorado is going to be $750,000. So, which seems like a lot, but the prices of homes now going up and up and up, that's not going to give you full coverage for property as well. So it's imperative that you do what you can to stay with your carrier. Doug touched on as well, have an advocate for you, whoever, your agent is, to push for you. Do the work up front. You want to have your home best prepared for that inspection, like you talked about. As firefighters, we would go down the street and maybe one engine have 6 homes you have to protect on the street. Well, we do triage. We look at the best home that we have the best chance of saving. You have to think about it the same way for insurance. The more attractive your home is for firefighters, the more attractive your home is going to be to insurance carriers. And I think that's about it. Back to you, Laura.
Becca, did you want to hop in and do a little bit of introduction of United policyholders and who they are as partners in this work?
I can just super briefly touch on a couple of points. And I really appreciate, Mike, I really appreciate you sharing an insurance perspective as well, because there can be a tendency to paint the insurance industry into a negative corner, and really it should be seen as a partnership. But we all want the same things of not having homes burned down. So I just wanted to highlight that. It's really important. United Policyholders is a nonprofit organization that supports all insurance policyholders with information for being more prepared and for dealing with claims. And we have representatives in Colorado. They really work closely with residents after they have a loss to help people work through their challenges. And right now they're working on a survey as well that's going to be in the one pager we're going to share in the chat to find out and hear from people who are losing coverage. They're trying to get a better picture of that because they're doing a really good job in working with the industries and helping to lead some of those conversations with state divisions of insurance. So I will drop all those items in the chat, knowing that we're super short on time. And the other thing that I just think has not been highlighted enough here in terms of the trends that we are going for and why those letters aren't working the way maybe they used to, and why even if you have met the local certificate or something, why that might not work is because insurance companies don't have a really clear picture of risk from structure to structure ignition at this point. And so that individual risk and what you can do on your own property doesn't necessarily reflect the actual wildfire risk perspective. And that is why there are a lot of areas where there's a large pool of risk if they've got a lot of people covered in a certain area being dropped. So just think about that going forward, that a lot of the insurance strategies that we're going to see are no longer going to be based on individual, but they will be based on collective risk in denser areas. Yeah, I know we're about at time, Laura, so go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah, Becca, thanks for bringing that home. I recommended at the beginning of this webinar. It's really great to watch in conjunction with that one that the Division of Insurance with United Policyholders just put together. It's in our resource one pager, and they sort of bring it home the same way Becca just did. So thanks for that. I want to thank all our speakers for their contributions today. We intentionally kept our objectives focused, and we invite other organizations who are interested in leading additional guidance to do so. FACO is happy to support and promote those efforts. A clear takeaway is that there's professionals and organizations dedicated to recognizing the issues in front of us and working on them. We can all agree that leaders and insurance carriers need to urgently continue to prioritize this dialogue, and that the impacts of this issue in Colorado can be frustrating, confusing, and emotionally draining. As a wildfire resilience community, we do need to emphasize that the impacts are real, but also advocate and provide what guidance we can and maintain hope that this environment can improve. We do not have all the answers for what the future holds with insurance in Colorado, but whether you have insurance or not, as residents and as people working with homeowners, one thing we do know is how to lower the risk of communities and our homes. Fire Adapted Colorado is committed to keeping a pulse on this issue and sharing updates. If you are not already subscribed to the Fire Adapted Colorado newsletter, we're going to drop a link for that in the chat. FACO is staying engaged in this issue and regularly provides updates for practitioners who are further sharing with those on the ground. I want to then again thank everybody that participated today. I would ask you to review the resources in that one pager that are meant to complement this webinar, since we tried to keep it to an hour. And additionally, the United Policyholders has a survey where they're collecting data about the trends and what we're seeing in the marketplace in Colorado. So please contribute to their efforts to study and understand some of the issues that we're having, because they're going to be great advocates for us. We're also dropping a feedback form where you can submit to us any anonymous feedback for the webinar or anything you would want to contribute to future planning that we would be able to pass along or reflect on. So it's a very short feedback thing. It just sort of lets us know what you feel we need to know. Thank you again for joining us, and do stay in touch.